So hi everybody, I'm Mike Brennigan-Harris, CEO of Device Access. Glad to be doing this webinar with the team of the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence MedTech evaluation team, and we're bringing in John West, General Manager of Surgery and Orthopaedic at Paul Hospital, for his perspective, an important perspective on this. But we got asked to do this. There was an overwhelming response of people using SurveyMonkey, wanting to find out what NICE do, how they operate, how MedTech evaluations work. And one overwhelming question was always about what evidence do I need to go through NICE. So a little bit about us very briefly. We are a market access and reimbursement consultancy, been around for 10 years next week. And we help companies understand particularly NHS activity so that they can understand how their technology will make a difference in the National Health Service. So we're able to look at things like diagnosis of patients, what treatments they have, spend and outcomes. That helps us to then look at the impacts. We're also looking deeply at the moment into the waiting list, particularly at the moment with the COVID-19 situation, and understanding where hospitals are hitting targets in terms of their speciality, those aren't hitting their targets, and we're basically able to look and see where technology would make a difference. For the past 10 years, we've been helping companies navigate NICE. We believe that it's the right way to get technologies adopted because it overcomes any questions on safety, efficacy and cost effectiveness. As part of that, we also offer a service of getting health economic publications out there to support various programs as well. So that's a bit about us. What I wanted to do now was to introduce the team from NICE briefly and the people on today's webinar, and then we'll go into discussions about how NICE actually makes a difference when it comes to decision making in hospital, and then we'll go into further in depth as to what NICE does and how it works and how it evaluates products. So I'll just introduce you to Joanne Holden, just so she can introduce herself to you.
Thanks, Mike, and hello to everybody on the webinar, and thank you for joining, and thank you for your interest in this topic. It's great to have this opportunity to speak virtually to so many people, so thank you for this opportunity, Mike. Yes, hi, I'm Jo Holden, and I'm the Associate Director for the NICE Medical Technologies Evaluation Programme and the Interventional Procedures Programme, which I can give a little bit more detail about in this webinar today. And I've been at NICE for around about 11 years now. Throughout that time, I've been involved in health technology assessment and decision making for pharmaceuticals for quite a long time on a technologies appraisals program, but now with medical devices and interventional procedures. And prior to that, that's relevant to join the strands of the call of the people on the webinar today, I used to work at King's College Hospital in a business manager post, and so I share some of the experiences that John has and we'll talk about today, but also relevant because I understand about the way in which our evidence impacts on people who are using it in NHS service, and that's important for us to understand all perspectives when we're building our guidance documents. So that's just a little bit about me, and I hope to be able to share with you today some more information about our programs and how we hope we assist the NHS.
Thank you so much, Jo, for that, and again, welcome to the webinar. Over to you, Chris.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Pomfrit. I'm a technical advisor for research commissioning at the Medical Technologies Evaluation Programme at NICE. I've been on that programme for 9 years. Prior to NICE, I worked at Manchester Royal Infirmary in the University Department of Anaesthesia, did that for 20 years. And while I was there, I invented 4 medical technologies, one of which got to market, a medical device. At NICE, my job is to help to generate evidence when our committees have said that further evidence is required for a medical technology to receive positive recommendation. So I commission research through our external assessment centres. I'm also responsible for guidance review. So after about 3 years, we normally look at the guidance after it's published, make sure it's still up to date. If necessary, do a refresh with new information. And we may even go for a full update, in which case we go back to the committee and then we generate effectively updated guidance with new information in it. So my job is to make sure that guidance is up to date and also to make sure that the evidence is the best that is available in order to inform our committees.
Thank you so much, Chris, for that. And it's great to hear you've been on the other end of the table and, as you said, inventing and commercializing medical devices. So really welcome to the webinar, Chris. So over to you, John.
Hi, my name is John West. I am currently the General Manager for Surgery and Orthopaedics at Poole Hospital. My background is clinical, as a nurse pretty much in critical cares and emergency departments. My day job is to ensure that patients get the best deal, that we follow all of the quality standards, we make sure we're delivering against our financial targets, making sure that our services are safe, our staff are looked after, and ultimately making sure that patient outcomes are the best that they can possibly be. So it's nice and simple.
Great, thank you. So we'll just go into into more detail now for the webinar. And I think for starters, I mean, I've been involved in commercializing medical devices I did 20 years commercializing medical devices and 10 years running device access. So quite a few years at this now. But my story was really came together when I was working for a company called Venus Medical Technologies, and Venus had a technology for treating varicose veins using radiofrequency ablation, and that particular procedure came to market against a £15 very inexpensive vein stripper using an old technique called vein stripping, and we had to change practice. So I fully understand the challenges of getting change into the NHS, but as part of that journey, I was very lucky to I decided to make my sales team's job as easy as possible by taking the device to what was then the National Innovation Centre. And the National Innovation Centre is a body that no longer exists in the NHS, but looked for technologies and promoted them. And when that happened, we were able to get showcased by the National Innovation Centre, and that led me into the corridors of NICE in about 2010. And at the time, NICE was starting new programs, and I know Joe and Chris will go into the various different programs at NICE, but it was the beginning of trying to get recognition for great technologies nationally, and I felt that was the right thing to do. Why run around 156 odd hospitals in England trying to sell a story when, if there is an ability to get this properly assessed by a body like NICE or the time the National Innovation Centre, it was a great opportunity to make my sales team's life easier, to make buying decisions easier in hospitals, and get these great technologies to patients faster. And that's what we've been doing since. But what I wanted to do, the reason I wanted John on the call today was really his perspective as a general manager of surgery and orthopaedic in Poole Hospital. What it means, what is the difference between when a salesperson comes to knock on his door, either with or without a consultant surgeon that wants them to meet about a piece of technology, what difference it makes when the technology isn't NICE approved or recommended, and if it isn't. And I think it's an important point to start off with, is to why go through this? What difference does it make? What are the benefits? So, John, I think touching on that, I think it'd be good for you to go into a bit more detail. You see a number of salespeople coming to see you with your your specialities you cover. Can you go into what's life like when you get these knocks on doors from salespeople trying to sell you things?
Yeah, it's kind of twofold really. The first is it's around horizon scanning. So the majority of healthcare in the UK is delivered in district general hospitals, and most hospitals don't have the capacity to horizon scan to pick out the best technology to go seek it. So reliant on sales teams to come and deliver, to pick out and to come and present that information and those products. The difficulty when it doesn't have a NICE badge is that there's an element of risk in that the company and the product have to demonstrate the quality, the financial benefits, the safety, the patient outcomes alone, almost alone. There may well be evidence-based peer-reviewed documents to support their argument, but ultimately it sits as a risk to the organisation to take up that product, because there's not necessarily a groundswell of opinion that that's the best thing to be doing, so particularly for new innovative devices. That's really hard to be the first person or the first group of people taking something on, because usually it's a financial burden without a necessarily return on that investment. There's not necessarily the clear evidence in terms of patient outcomes that can give the assurance that a significant financial investment will give the patient outcomes that are being presented. So where NICE comes in, it kind of ticks all those boxes. So if a sales company is coming, we've already had to explain to our commissioners why we're not doing NICE, using NICE products and NICE guidance. When a salesperson comes along and their product has got NICE guidance, or it kind of ticks the boxes of quality, financial efficacy, the safety elements, and the patient outcomes. It also adds in another 3 layers of demand, or not demand, but areas of consideration. Is firstly is around litigation. It's an unpleasant place to talk about it, but if we're doing procedures that are outside of NICE recommendations or guidance and things go wrong, it opens clinicians and organisations up to an element of risk. That why weren't we doing that? What evidence have we have, again, that's better than the nationally approved way of working or doing something? There's a reputational risk as well. So if we're not doing things that are NICE recommended, our patients can choose to go where they are. And that's not a great reputational place to be. There's also, in our NHS contracts, we are contractually obliged to use the latest and best technology as advised by NICE. So if we were to be really stringently managed against our contracts, we would have particularly challenges around with our commissioners about justifying why we're not doing things that are nationally guided and recommended.
Thank you so much, John. So the difference in time to market, time that, these salespeople trying to sell you things in the hospital. So, how much more quickly can you get things through the system if they are NICE approved versus if they're not, in terms of a time scale?
I think realistically, depending on the level of need to do it, it's a matter of weeks versus years. If you're talking about investments that have a revenue cost of £1 million a year and it's NICE approved, all the evidence is there, and the contractual stuff and the litigation risks and almost the responsibility to do it is taken out of the NHS or out of the organisation, then decisions are made really quickly. Without that, it takes an awful lot of time and negotiation and work to get decisions around investment in new devices.
Great. So I really appreciate that contribution from you, John, today. I think I think Jo understands that as well from her work in previous roles within the NHS in similar position. But I think we'll just sort of lead into we've clearly just established why NICE is very important for the adoption of MedTech, and NICE is a big organisation running lots of different programs. And what I thought would be helpful would be for us to try and unpick those different departments and what NICE are looking for, and then all the acronyms, and for Jo to explain the different programs that NICE run. We have interventional procedures, we have these things called MedTech innovation briefings, we have guidance, we have lots of these different ones, for her to explain what they do, how they run, and how they're different. And then I part of the reason I wanted Chris on this as well is a couple of years ago, NICE published a paper looking at the 5-year, the last 5 years of MedTech evaluations to look at evidence. And I think it's a really, really powerful paper, and something I really wanted to get out to the industry to understand. That question is, what evidence works, okay, looking at the past work that NICE have done. So I'll hand over to Joe to go through the some additional information now as to how NICE runs and how each program is managed. So I'll hand over to Joe.
Thanks, Mike. So I really hope that we can shed lots of light on what we do, because we recognise that there's lots of work going on within NICE, and it is sometimes difficult from an outside perspective to get right to the point of getting the information that you need for the place in NICE that you particularly want to get to. And actually, what I ought to say right at the front is that there's a really exciting initiative going on within NICE, which will take us through the next however many years to develop the organisation using into something that's much more joined together through an initiative called NICE Connect, and that will probably change the way that we look in years to come. But what I'm going to give you today is how we currently look at the moment. So most people have heard of NICE. It stands for the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. It was established in 1999, so we've just celebrated our 20th anniversary, and it works to improve the quality, sustainability and productivity of health and social care. That's the kind of strapline that we'll give you formally. So we've been responsible for health service guidance for a long time, and in 2013 we took responsibility for social care as well. It's important to say that NICE is independent of government, and we have a status as a non-departmental public body which is established in primary legislation. So there's offices in London and Manchester, around about 620 staff, and we deliver guidance, standards, indicators and evidence. So that's quite a high level sort of introduction. So within that portfolio, we've got clinical guidelines, there's the health technology appraisals for new medicines and diagnostics, interventional procedures, quality standards, indicators. There's the NICE Scientific Advice Programme, Office for Market Access, and of course the Medical Technologies Evaluation Programme, which produces both the MedTech innovations and the MedTech guidance, and we'll cover those in more detail. And of course, I should mention at present that the focus of the Institute has turned to COVID-19 with the production of rapid clinical guidelines, whether that be managing the symptoms and complications of the disease, or providing or in evidence to help the health service during the pandemic deliver obviously other care. And NICE has produced some MedTech innovation briefings for a couple of areas during this pandemic. That's kind of high level introduction to NICE. What I want to do now is to just give you more information about the different programs in health technology assessment. So historically, the different programs have been organised around the technology types, and these include, as I said, the Technology Appraisals Programme and the Medical Technologies Programme, the Diagnostics Programme and the Interventional Procedures Programme. So what are the differences? Well, the TA programme provides recommendations on the use of new and existing medicines and treatments for the NHS. It's the only form of guidance that carries a mandatory funding requirement at present. And the clinical and cost effectiveness of a technology is considered through a cost utility approach, and therefore the evidence required for this programme includes quality adjusted life years, or QALYs, for both the intervention and the comparator and the analysis. So really the reason for giving you that detail is to highlight just what kind of evidence any technology going through that TA programme requires. The diagnostic programme evaluates new innovative diagnostic technologies, and it again uses a cost effectiveness framework. Diagnostics can also be assessed through the MedTech programme, but where the evaluation is complex, or where multiple technologies and multiple indications are included in the same assessment, well, the DAT programme is specifically set up to handle the specific complexities that those technologies present. Now, Interventional Procedures programme formulates guidance on the safety and efficacy of new interventional procedures. And there's a definition that you can find on the NICE website for how we define those interventional procedures. So the main aim of that programme is to protect patients from harm, and also to support the introduction or highlight new procedures where the evidence supports clinical benefit. So IP guidance does not look at cost or comparative effectiveness of either the procedure or any devices involved in the procedure. But if there is a device involved, then there must be at least one device with a CE mark for the indication. Around 70% of procedures going through the IP programme have an associated device. So there is quite a link between the IP programme and the MedTech programme. And just finally to say on interventional procedure guidance that it doesn't mean that a procedure or a device should be used. That is still the commissioner or the provider's decision. So the fourth type of guidance that I want to talk about is from the Medical Technologies Evaluation Programme. And the aim there is to promote faster access to and the uptake of beneficial technologies in the NHS. And it also aims to encourage collaborative research to generate the evidence where it may be missing, but the technology appears to offer plausible clinical benefit. And Chris will be able to give more information on that. So we look at single technologies within MTech guidance, and their clinical benefit is assessed comparatively against the standard of care in NHS practice. So that is important. We're looking at what is currently in use in NHS practice now, and we're looking at it comparatively. So what's the incremental benefit? Costs are considered in a cost consequence framework where all of the costs and benefits are totaled independently for the different treatment strategies. So again, that's different to the cost effectiveness framework used in either of the TA or the DAP programs. And importantly, the program considers new devices that provide more benefits at the same or lower cost, or they provide the same benefits at a lower cost. And what we provide then is medical technologies guidance, which is in shorthand we call MTG. So all of those guidance outputs from those programs are based on the deliberations of independent committees. And with the exception of IP guidance, the interventional procedures guidance, independent academic centres assist the committees in critiquing the evidence. And again, that's important because guidance has come through a lot of processes before it's published, and those programmes are specific in using independent academic centres to critique the evidence base before it goes to the committee. Now, in addition to those guidance outputs, I just want to move on to the MIB. So this is an output known as a MIB, but it stands for MedTech Innovation Briefing. It's not guidance in the way I've just described, so it doesn't go through the committee. There's no deliberation or judgment or independent academic assessment. So instead, this is a document in which NICE summarises the available published evidence for a medical device, as well as some expert clinical opinion. So these documents may look at, for example, a potential place in treatment pathway, but they don't contain any judgment on whether that position in the pathway is correct or not. They're meant as advice documents to help the healthcare system understand the current state of evidence for a particular device. They do sometimes contain more than one device to help provide all of the evidence in one place, where a number of devices are being brought to market within a similar time frame. So just to finish then on that then, so why a MIB and not an MTG? Well, to produce guidance based on a judgment of comparative clinical efficacy and cost, the committee requires evidence of the additional clinical benefit or against a realistic comparator in the NHS. It might be that that evidence is indirect. It's not necessarily from a randomised controlled trial, but the evidence does have to allow for that comparison to be made in order for us to take it through the MedTech guidance programme. A MIB may be produced with much less comparative evidence, but still is something where we feel that there's value to be added in the system by pulling all of that evidence together. And then just finally to add, I haven't mentioned digital technologies, but we have been looking at digital health technologies within all of these programs, and we've just finished a pilot program in which several topics went through the process of being put through the MTech process, guidance process, and we haven't finished that. We haven't published the results on that, but just to say that digital technologies have a home within NICE, and we expect that to evolve over time. So that's a long answer, Mike, but there's quite a lot to cover in what we do and why they're all different.
There is, yeah. I describe it, you know, when I talk to companies, I describe things in a very visual way, and you know, interventional procedures I describe as, you know, a car going into a wall being tested. You know, do the airbags work? Does it stop and does it start? Is it safe? Okay, and does it do what it says it does? That's as I see interventional procedures, my simple way. A MedTech innovation briefing is a bit like a data sheet on a car saying this is a Ford Fiesta. It comes in yellow, green, black and white. It got 4 doors. It's got a 1.3 litre engine and it costs £15,000. It doesn't tell you to buy it, but it tells you what it is and how it works, and it talks about the specific technology as opposed to, you know, the procedure. And then guidance, I describe it as if you're going between London and Bristol and you have a choice of 6 cars, which one gets you there the safest, the most reliably, and the most cost effectively. And, you know, that's sort of how I describe it in a simple sort of way as to some of the different programs that you run there. But what I really appreciate that in that introduction into the different programs, Joe, and we've got some more questions afterwards, but I wanted to jump into this sort of evidence side of NICE, and delighted to have Chris on this today. As I say, some time ago, NICE published a paper, and I'm going to hand over to Chris.
So following from what Joe was saying about our guidance product, so the main one there is Medical Technologies Guidance, MTG. The recommendation in the published MTG can be one of these options. So we want to be able to say the company claims are supported. And so what that means is the company has said that the product achieves a certain number of things. Claims of benefit are what we're looking for here. And so we'd love to say the company claims are supported, and that's going to be by the evidence, and it's also going to be by the cost. So as Joe said, MTG is based on the product being cost neutral, so it costs the same as the existing standard of care, or cost saving, but it's got to be as effective or more effective than the standard of care. If that isn't supported by the evidence, we can say the claims are plausible, but further research is required. And that's where my job comes in, and where the external assessment centres come in, the EACs, and they generate evidence to help to answer uncertainties. Or only use the device in research. This is a rare recommendation by NICE, where we limit the use of a device to research only. So evidence has to be collected in some form of real-world data acquisition to prove that the device actually meets the claims that the company have made, or rarely we say the company claims are not supported, and so we're making a recommendation that the device should not be used for the indication that the company has notified to us. So to summarise, what does NICE want from medical devices that we look at? 2 questions: does it work, and is it too expensive? And the decision with regard to who deliberates over this, who makes the decision, is an independent committee. So in the case of MTG, Medical Technologies Guidance, that's the Medical Technologies Advisory Committee, or MTAC. So this slide shows the members of MTAC sitting around a table. Obviously this will be done virtually if things carry on the way they are at the moment. But there are approximately 25 members of MTAC who are drawn from a wide background. Some are clinicians, some are lay people, some are advocates for a technology who are brought in to present information for a particular meeting. And at the other side of the table is the chair of MTAC, who governs everything. So our current chair is Professor Peter Groves. Previously it was Professor Bruce Campbell. Also at the meeting we have the company representatives. The company generally can be asked questions from the committee, but they're not otherwise allowed to speak during a meeting. And they're only there for half of the meeting, a part 1, where the information is public. Any deliberations with regard to the recommendations of committee are held in private in a part 2, and the company and the public wouldn't be present. Public can request to attend a meeting, and they can see the part 1 open deliberations about a technology. We also have NICE observers and observers from parts of the National Health Service who want to see the process. And the NICE team at the moment in Joe's team is approximately 20 people in MedTech who generate the information that's required by the committee. We also have experts who are brought in who are clinical specialists, and they will review the information that has been presented, and they will sometimes be invited to communicate by phone. And these experts are generally clinicians, but they can also be patient advocates, they can be representing patient groups. In the past, we've also had patients presenting to committee. And the final part of these slides, in the company there, we've got Mike Brannigan-Harris, who has attended many of our MTAC meetings. We have the External Assessment Centre, who will be present for some of the meeting to present their findings, their independent findings, as Joe said earlier. And then I'm on the committee, and also Joe Holden is on the committee as well. So the main take-home message I would like to present to you today is that the claims of benefit don't necessarily equal evidence. Just because a company or an expert has said that something works, that doesn't necessarily mean that that statement is evidence. And so the idea is to match the claims of benefit to the evidence during an evaluation. The paper that Mike was referring to earlier was one where we looked at, do claims of benefit match the evidence? And this was in the International Journal of Technology Assessment in Healthcare. It's in the public domain, so you can download a free copy. And it's assessing the value of innovative medical devices and diagnostics, the importance of clear and relevant claims of benefit. We also have a partner paper to that published the year before, which reviewed the whole process for the first 5 years. So looking at the results from those papers, we had 186 technologies notified in the first 5 years of the MTech program, of which 39 were deemed to be ineligible. And the eligibility criteria are published on our website. So the first thing you need to do is actually look at the NICE website and look to see if you are eligible to notify your technology to NICE. We also, or the committee decided not to select 80 technologies out of the 186 notified, and we looked in some detail at the reasons for that non-selection. The main reason for not selecting a technology, and that's for 86% of technologies notified to NICE, was a lack of evidence. In order to do health technology assessment, there has to be some evidence in order to make the judgment. And it was felt that there wasn't enough evidence in order to evaluate the technologies in 86% of cases. Other important factors were that the technology was not novel. The eligibility criteria for our program really revolve around the idea that this is a new way of doing things. We have looked at some technologies that have been around for a few years, but generally those technologies have not taken off. It wasn't perceived that they had entered into majority sale, and this is an important thing. We're looking really for innovative technologies that, if you're into marketing, haven't necessarily crossed the chasm into majority sale, and MTG can be seen as a way of helping them to cross that chasm. Also, in 10% of cases, there was considered by committee to be a usability or technology design issue. And this is something that's come in now with the medical device regulations. There's a consideration for ergonomics and human factors. And this is now something that's part of the medical device regulations. The device has got to look and feel good for purpose. And from my own experience as a clinical scientist, I'm aware of early prototypes that look like they're out of a laboratory that most clinicians would not use in a clinical setting. And this is actually a consideration, that if the thing doesn't look right and clinicians tell us that they wouldn't use it because it doesn't look right, it doesn't work properly, then that would be a definite form of evidence that would count against the technology. The types of claims of benefit that we've looked at NICE. You can actually look at the paper if you want detail here, but patient benefits that we have looked at are safety, even though we're not a safety program, interventional procedures is, but obviously we're looking for specifically less complications during the use of a device. We're looking for clinical benefit in that it's more effective, perhaps, and lasts longer. Experiential benefit has been looked at, less time in hospital for the patient, less painful for the patient, fewer visits, and other benefits. And the health system benefits that the committee look at are things like fewer attendances, lower treatment costs, so that would be for ancillary consumables, facilities, perhaps less staff, the ability to use a lower pay grade of staff, and less treatment of complications. And another thing that's quite important to NICE is sustainability. So increasingly we're looking at whether the new technology reduces waste, reduces the use of power, and reduces the need to travel. So reviewing our work over the first 5 years, 1,260 claims of benefit were considered by the committee in total across all of the technologies, a mean of 7.5 claims per technology. But the total number of claims per technology was not significantly associated with whether the committee actually recommended that a technology should be part of medical technologies guidance. Only one particular category claim was considered to be was significantly associated with selection, and that was the benefit to patients of quicker recovery. But claims of experiential benefit for patients, less pain, things like that, were not actually associated with technologies being selected. That is often the case, that there's not enough evidence for those claims. And as I said at the beginning, the claims of benefit have got to match the evidence. And here's a breakdown of the claims, table 2 of the second paper, where we looked at the numbers of claims against whether something was selected or not. So the largest number of claims were for clinical benefit, 402 claims, which it was about equal. 192 of those claims were in selected technologies, 210 in non-selected. But experiential benefit, you can see there were less claims for the selected ones than the non-selected ones. So committee weren't convinced by those. Technologies that were selected had significantly greater total numbers of studies to support the claims than those that were not selected. Now, this is a bit of a no-brainer. It really means that if there's more evidence, it's more likely that a committee will be interested in looking at this technology for medical technologies guidance. The types of study, and people who are experienced with clinical research might be surprised by this, the number of randomized controlled trials was not significantly associated with selection decisions. Cohort studies were, surveys were, and cost analyses were. When things were not selected by a committee for further evaluation, these were significantly pilot studies, unpublished studies submitted in confidence, and marketing claims with no substantiating evidence. And this is again getting back to what I've said at the beginning, that claims of evidence don't necessarily mean evidence. And in the past, NICE have seen marketing claims with no substantiating evidence. And obviously, the committee will reject marketing claims with no science behind them. And so looking at the breakdown of the technology evidence that we've seen, observational studies was the majority of evidence that were considered by committee, but we looked at a wide range. And one of the benefits of going to medical technologies guidance at NICE is that we look at all evidence. We look at grey literature, we look at really anything that has been peer reviewed by somebody in an academic environment, but that could be conference posters, it could be presentations to learned societies, but as long as someone has peer reviewed the evidence and can say to NICE, yes, this meets the criteria of being an academic publication. Things that were academic in confidence with us and which didn't actually end up being published were a definite factor for things not being selected. And of course, academic in confidence is something that's used by NICE to protect the peer review process. So we can look at evidence that's been submitted to a journal but not necessarily peer reviewed, but we do expect it to ultimately be peer reviewed and published. So right at the end of the paper, sorry this is a block of text, but Bruce Campbell summarised a clear vision of the best application for any new technology, and a well-crafted value proposition formed the foundation for its success. If these have been well planned, then the claims about the technology can be presented with confidence and should have sufficient evidence to support them. Those are the keys to success when scrutinised by NICE and other HTA bodies, and to rapid adoption.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. As I say, I had the pleasure of seeing that a few months ago at the Royal Society of Medicine, so it's great to see it again. I think it's a very powerful summary and very informative to the industry out there in understanding the sort of, you know, what evidence has worked, what hasn't worked, etc. So just got a few questions, really, Chris. You know, when should industry think about engaging with NICE? What's your view on that?
In my experience, it's not too early to start looking at what NICE requires when you're the inventor, having a look at what you want to actually produce. And as an ex-inventor, I wish I'd actually looked at the NICE website and looked at the types of evidence that would be required. NICE Scientific Advice offer a service whereby they can look at a technology in confidence and actually make recommendations as to what sort of evidence needs to be generated in order to be successful at some stage in the future with health technology assessment. But there is too early with regard to the medical technologies programs. If you have no evidence, and if you are not in a position to place your product on the market, that is too early for NICE to consider. You have to be in a position that you're ready to go to market. And in terms of product development, that would be that you have a pre-production prototype that you can demonstrate in a clinical environment, or if you're in a social care environment, actually out there in the field. So if you've got a benchtop prototype, that's way too early. And you have to have the version fairly well matured so that when we evaluate the product, it is at a state that the guidance that we produce represents the finished product that will be sold to the NHS. We can cope with version changes, but we expect that you're not doing active alpha testing when we're producing HTA. You should be at the end of your product development and you should be ready to go to market.
So I think many people have heard of Health Tech Connect now, but it's still something that when we go to various forums, or we're invited to various forums, there are still many companies out there who haven't heard of Health Tech Connect. And if you're wondering what it is, then you can just type in healthtechconnect.org.uk and you'll find out more information. But it's a system that's been built by Cigna, it's been developed and hosted by NICE, developed with companies and in partnership with a range of other organisations, and NHS England provided the funding for this service. So it's a repository of key information about diagnostics. It's not developed just as a catalogue of all health technologies, and that's, I think, important because we're using it to find more devices than we previously would have found before. Secure online system, and there's lots of fields in there to input relevant information. And who has access? Well, it's automatically shared with some of the accessor organisations such as NICE for the purposes of selecting technologies that might go through the programme, but there are also a number of other accessor organisations, and you can find the full list of them online, who, if you choose to provide access to, they can also pick up that product and provide all sorts of helpful advice. So I guess in response to the question about how early, well, Health Tech Connect is a great sort of lead in and helps the right organisations to pick the technologies up at the right time. And NICE Scientific Advice has access to, if it's granted access, and they can also help to pick those products up at the right point. So I just wanted to mention Health Tech Connect at that point, really.
No, thanks. Yeah, I think yeah, the process of notification has changed. And I know that as far as interventional procedures is concerned, Joe, how does that work differently? Because obviously when new treatments are, or new therapies are done by NHS hospitals, what's the mechanism for that? Is it for the hospital to notify NICE, or can it be the hospital and the manufacturer of the technology that's using that new treatment to notify NICE? How does it work with new treatments? Is that still to go through the Health Tech Connect programme?
So anyone can notify NICE of a new novel interventional procedure that they feel may warrant us to look at through the IP programme. And just to say that the Health Tech Connect system does also we can pick those up through Health Tech Connect, and we will do an internal check of whether we think health IP guidance is required or not. So it can come through all channels, and there's no right way and there's no wrong way, and we do what we need to do at NICE's end to make sure that if it needs to go to IP first, that it will do. Okay, that's helpful, thank you. So Joe, you know, can you describe, I mean, why MIBs why the MedTech Innovation Briefings were invented, and you know, generally, how powerful are they for hospital decision-making decisions? They, as I said earlier in describing the two products, they are necessarily different because we recognise that the state of evidence won't be sufficiently developed in all cases for us to take through that full programme of developing medical technologies guidance. We may also find that there actually isn't an awful lot of value in providing full MedTech guidance or MTG, but there is still a requirement for us to produce a statement of the evidence on a device or several devices where there is a clinical need. So in a way, the MIBs fill a space that the MedTech guidance wouldn't be able to fill, and they're also they're also produced on a much shorter time frame because obviously there's no committee deliberation. So I think what we're finding, and we're particularly finding this with the current situation, we can take a device, and with the evidence that's there, providing there is something, I mean, we can't do, you know, we can't, if there's no evidence whatsoever, then we wouldn't consider a MIB. But if there is enough there, then we will take that forward and produce a statement on it, which is just factual, providing, you know, no judgment, no and no recommendation within it. What we hear is that that's found, it's particularly useful where different organisations, different trusts are having to otherwise compile all of that information together themselves and analyse it. And of course, what we also do is we seek expert opinion, and we incorporate that into the MIB. So it may be really helpful for other trusts to understand, you know, where has this particular device been useful for them? How have they used it? What have been the barriers to using it? Sometimes you'll get differences of opinion, and we will always provide that balance within a MIB. So again, for, you know, a local decision maker, it's hopefully very useful for them to be able to get that information without kind of having to pick up the phone and ring their colleagues across the country. Yeah, sure, that's very helpful. So so when it comes down to it, obviously, since you've opened up the Health Tech Connect portal, you've had an overwhelming amount of submissions or notifications through there, and you know, you say you have 600 or so staff at NICE, and I don't know what the split is between the medical technology side and the pharmaceutical side, which I know is a very big part of NICE. But sort of, how does, you know, bearing in mind, you know, the overwhelming amount of work you do at NICE, and particularly at the moment with the COVID-19, so how does the topic selection work? So topic selection is a process that goes through a number of stages, and obviously we don't have the kind of capacity that the technology assessment program has. We are still a smaller program, and so we have to be very considered in the types of and the devices that we take forward, and to be confident that they are going to have that chance of giving what, you know, as Chris said, we want to give the positive endorsement. So we do quite a lot of work up front to ensure that we've got the evidence, that there is a reason, a kind of a value. We know that there's going to be added value from particularly taking that device and then producing guidance for the NHS on it, and also that we're quite convinced, or we feel certain at that stage, that we're in kind of cost saving or cost equivalent territory. So obviously, if a device looks like it may incur additional budget impact for the NHS, then we wouldn't take it through the Medical Technologies Guidance Programme. So all of that consideration has to happen up front. And you know, we do it through a process that's fairly well documented through the process guides online, and you know, it's fairly easy to get a little bit more of that information if you want to do. And what we then do is we take it to an internal program called the Technologies Oversight Group, that makes a final decision about whether it should be routed to the Medical Technologies Guidance Programme or a MIB. And that the people involved in that include external members of the system as well. So for example, NHS England are represented on that group, as is the Department of Health and Social Care. And we get consultant clinical input into the decision making on that group. So there's quite a lot of consideration in the selection of topics to make sure that we are putting the resources into, you know, the devices that we feel have got the best chance of being successful through the programme in so many ways.
Sure, that's very helpful, Jo. I think you know, currently the NHS are facing, you know, a very big sort of backlog of you know, big waiting list, and you know, will there be any changes, do you think, ahead in terms of priorities over things that may be, for example, able to reduce waiting lists faster, or reducing length of stay, these sort of things? Do you think these are some of the things that would have a higher chance of success, or will there be any changes in priorities, or can't you say?
You know, it's a really interesting question, Mike, and I mean, it's one that we're considering quite a lot at the moment, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, because, you know, yes, we're at the point at which you know, everything stopped almost in the country. We had a fully established programme with lots of different technologies going through it, and we are yet to confirm what our restart plan will be. A lot of that work is going on across the whole of NICE at the moment, and that's happening at the same time as obviously quite a lot of effort being put into the COVID resources that many teams are working across. So the answer is we can't confirm for definite, but the kinds of considerations that I'm thinking about are, you know, why would we miss out on this opportunity at the moment to really help the system with some of the enormous pressures that it will face, undoubtedly, with the huge backlog of elective work that is built up. You know, and if we can add in any way to our work by selecting those devices, many of them will be digital as well, which show great promise, but also have that evidence base that we've talked a lot about today, that where we can put that in front of a committee and they can deliberate that. And I think, you know, we can get quite excited about potential technologies that will have that possibility, that will offer that possibility. And I think it is undoubtedly going to, you know, come into our thinking as we go forward. Can we do that in a rapid timescale? That's the other question. You know, how can we take what we've learned from the COVID-19 situation and apply that to our standard ways of working? Can we find ways of efficiencies that speed up the process? And how much risk can we take on when we do that? Because obviously by speeding up the process, parts of it will get in, you know, either shortened or cut out completely. And of course, we want to remain the transparent and well-trusted organisation that we've always been. So there's a balance to be struck, but we're very aware that there may be some great opportunities that we should explore going forward. And I think with devices that, you know, we're keen to hear of what they are.
That's a very good point, Jo. So since 2010, when NICE started, obviously you've done a great deal of work and helped to get a lot of technologies through and leading to adoption in the NHS. I've seen some very positive changes during that time, particularly with the interventional procedures and the MedTech guidance program, inviting the industry into the public meetings to represent themselves and ask technical questions of the products. And I think that was a great advance. So you've done a lot of work. I mean, where do you see NICE being in sort of 5 years' time? Any sort of view into the future on NICE?
So as I mentioned at the start, there's a big piece of work going on within NICE at the moment to connect all of the work together. And I think that's a really exciting initiative that, you will see will hopefully radically improve the way in which you can interact with us as an organisation, and that you can access the information that we provide across many programmes, because obviously health is not standalone, devices are not standalone, drugs are not standalone. They work within the context of the healthcare system and the guidelines that we produce. And even internally we find that we've become almost too big for ourselves. There's so much information there to be able to be on top of all of it. So we need a way of working which brings all of that together, and I think we'll see that the NICE Connect initiative will really help us in that way. So that's kind of the future for the organisation. I think in terms of the MedTech scene, it's really interesting. Of course, we've just experienced an increase in MedTech capacity, which was outlined really and sponsored by lots of strategic sort of initiatives. And we're really pleased that the long-term plan has put much more of an emphasis on devices, and in line with that, we've expanded our capacity to meet what we can, we know will be an increase in the need for medical technologies guidance. And it'll be really interesting to see over time whether that increases further still. Obviously, alongside that, there's several other system initiatives, so that the funding mandate consultation and the draft funding mandate, that will be again another really important development for MedTech guidance. And all of these things help us to place the importance of NICE guidance within the system. And I think that's really important because, and it's really great to hear from John about how it helps, because without, understanding and getting that feedback, it's hard to know, is there a need for more? So it's a two-way thing. We kind of want to know, is there a need for more? And if yes, in what areas? And we're really keen to work with areas of the system that can give us that information. I think just the other thing, of course, to say is that we've always moved with the times, if you like. We've always tried to incorporate developments in health technology methodology across all of the programs, but also in developments in technologies. And as I mentioned earlier, digital technologies are no exception. And as you know, we produced the evidence standards framework last year. We've done further development work on it. That's been ongoing throughout the time. It's been incredibly successful. And we've put the first technology through the MTech program. It hasn't concluded yet, but we're already testing new ways of being able to work with new technologies, and that will inevitably lead to new ways of engaging, I think, as well. And digital brings that opportunity as well. Will there be opportunities to use digital technologies to improve the way in which we work as well? So I think all sorts of ways in which the programs will evolve, but the emphasis is on working with the system and with key partners to understand where that evolution needs to be and where the demand for our work exists. And so again, really keen to hear from the NHS, from other organisations where they find the benefit of NICE advice and guidance.
Yeah, I think it's a very valid point, actually. I mean, we've seen with some of the technologies that we've helped navigate NICE that has led to coverage in other countries, particularly the US, with some of the payers like Blue Cross Blue Shield and Anthem. It must be reassuring to know that you are looked up as to one of the the most respected HTA in the world. So last question, Joe, and this is one from the industry. Should industry be in any way afraid of NICE?
No, definitely not. And I suppose I would say that, but, you know, I really want to endorse what we said out earlier today, that, you know, we are a positive program. If you look at the way in which the wording of our advice is structured, it's about the case for adoption. And this is not a sort of, you know, rule out the devices that shouldn't be going to market. This is really about promoting the devices where it's a really, you know, an exciting prospect for the committee to consider those devices and to really want to endorse them. And we accept that there will be evidence gaps in some areas, and that's why we have our research commissioning part of the programme, which Chris has talked about today, and that we can work with companies to work out where those evidence gaps are, and then, you know, with the longer term aim of being able to provide that full adoption case and that full support for the adoption case. So I think we need to work with industry. We need to understand industry's concerns. We need to understand the difficulties of getting devices into routine use. We also need to work with NHS England, users of our guidance, to understand where they have the demand for us to look at the evidence. And, you know, in a way, we need everybody, you know, we need to work with everybody to do that. So we really try and be transparent. That's one of the main tenets of our organisation. So we try to be very fair about the way in which we interact with individual people and with individual companies. We try and put as much information on our processes on our websites, and where there's not that information, you know, we hope that we've got the structures in place to be able to provide answers to any questions. So I do hope that we've been able to give more information for companies considering it, but also the sort of encouragement to say, please do share your information, particularly have a look at Health Tech Connect and the opportunities that provides, and work with us, and we hopefully, you know, we'll get to that point further down the line of being able to produce positive guidance. That is our aim.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Joe Holden, Chris Pomfrit, and John West today for joining in on this webinar. It's been a pleasure. We've learned a lot, and yeah, appreciate your time, and we'll sign off for now.